The object of Taxi Chronicles is to allow real riders with real stories, share their experience and enhance your life. So sit back and enjoy the journey. Morning. Yes, we're back with another rider, another episode. Today we are honoured to have an economics guy in the house. And when I mean economics, he goes way back in talking about Mesopotamian Egyptian times and how they collected taxes. It was so fascinating, I had to ask him to repeat it again because one, I don't think I'd have remembered it, the whole story, but I just found it really fascinating. So nice to have you here today, Michael.
Nice to be here.
Okay, so give us a brief on your background.
So I'm Irish. I'm currently a university professor at the University of Oxford in the field of economics and in particular macroeconomics. So thinking about government policies that raise taxes and interest rate policies. So that's my background. I used to work at the Bank of England, but now I'm an academic.
Okay, so you left the Bank of England to come here, to come to university.
Yeah, it's much more freedom. Do what I want, think what I want.
Did you ever go down in the gold vault?
I have actually, yes.
Really?
Yes.
I went there, I didn't go into the vault.
Yeah.
I went there to the museum when my daughter was in school, and they said it's as big as 4 football pitches.
Yeah, there's so 1 foot. I don't know if you know much in the city of London, but there's the NatWest Tower, which is one of the sort of taller towers, and at least when I first went there, it was I think the tallest tower in the area. There is more space under the Bank of England than there is in the entire NatWest Tower, all whatever 40 floors of it. Yeah, there's a lot of space down there.
Okay, I saw a picture, war damage during the war, from the Blitz, of that road. The road around the Bank of England had just collapsed.
Oh, really?
From the German bombs. So I'm wondering how long has those vaults been down there?
Oh, I think they've been there a long time. There's an old tale. I was told this by the person who was in charge of the gold at the Bank of England at the time. Some guy who basically said he kept writing letters into the bank. This is like going back to the
Victorian era?
No, early 1900s. So about 115 years ago, something like that. He kept writing saying that it was possible to get in there from the tube lines.
Yeah, I heard that story. They told us that story.
And he kept saying it, and the bank just would dismiss him. And then apparently one day he said, right, I'm going to show you. And they came into the vaults the next day and he was sitting there on the gold. Said, look, I tell you can get in here. I have no idea how true it is, but it's a good story.
He's a very honest man. He's a very honest
Exactly.
man. No, I heard the same story, just the way the guy, maybe he told it like that because they were children, but he said the guy came to the front door, eventually the man, I think he's a street cleaner or whatever, and then he just said, tell your boss to meet me downstairs in the vault. And the man told him, like, go away, you vagabond.
Okay.
And then he said, and then there's like a bit of commotion, so he walked off, and then someone said to the reception guy, what does he want? He said, he told me to tell you and the boss to meet him downstairs. And he said, okay, we better go down there just in case. And that's when they found him sitting on the gold. Yeah. But he got paid some money. It wasn't that much money. The funny thing was, all my daughter in her school, the kids said, "No, we would have took the money. We would have took all the gold."
Well, there is that. So we went down there when I first started working at the bank, and to work there we had to go through a pretty serious amount of security vetting.
Yep.
And even still, I think there were about 20 of us who went down, and there were about 20 security guys with us. So it was very clear that we were not going to be allowed free rein. But it was also, they pointed out, and I don't know if you tried it in the museum, you can pick up the gold.
It's heavy.
It's heavy, right? Yeah, so like you see movies like The Italian Job. Yeah. You're not driving a Mini up and down stairs if you've chucked 50 bars of gold in the back. That thing is sitting on the back axle and it's just not going anywhere. So it was not the guy who was with us. He was called the bullion manager. He said to us that if you tried to just take a gold bar and put it like in the inside pocket of a suit jacket, it would just rip right through in most jackets. So anyway, I didn't try. I'll be clear with you.
Mind you, there's a movie, Three Kings, with Ice Cube and George Clooney and forgotten his name. There's the third guy's name, and they're in Iraq. It's called the Three Kings.
Okay.
And they come along a lot of Iraqi gold, and they're trying to move it, and they're putting it in these bags, and they have to put it in the suitcases to hold the weight, and that stuff like that. So you were explaining earlier on about the history of taxation. Do you want to go over that again?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that, you know, there was a long time in economics that when we thought about why countries are rich and some countries are poor, we thought a lot about physical, what we call factors of production, basically machines, capital, and labor, how skilled it is, etc. But in the last 30 years, there's been a big shift in focus to thinking about the institutions that underlie the economy. And actually, you know, the history of our institutions can be traced way back. So, you know, a very famous economist, a guy called Darren Acemoglu and Robinson, they have work that sort of shows the sort of effect of different colonial occupiers on different countries. So whether you became a common law or a civil law country affects how people then, over the next 300-400 years, invested. And people have gone even further back. So a former colleague of mine at the University of Warwick, and some co-authors, they went as far back as ancient Egypt to show how taxation was adjusted depending on the fertility of the soil that you had in a given year. And they would measure this by looking at how much the Nile flooded. So they had all systems to measure. Because one of the issues always with this is, I mean, old systems in the UK, for instance, you might have a fixed tax. You just tell people you have to pay this if you want to live in England. You pay the king X, whatever X is that year. But, you know, people would recognize that might not always be fair. You know, life happens, bad things happen. Some years, you know, the crop fails or whatever. But the problem with proportional taxes is you have to monitor them. So, you know, in a way, you have to sort of tell people how much you earn. So, with that system, you could abuse it by just saying, "Oh, guys, I'm real sorry. I didn't get lucky this year. You know, I didn't have good crops, so I can't pay you any taxes." And of course, you know, they could send one, you know, like the example I gave of the bank's vaults. They could send one person with each farmer to watch them, but that's very costly. So you don't really want to do that. So this idea that they had in ancient Egypt was, you just monitored the floodplains and how much water they got, and if you were in an area that had a good amount of water, and therefore the soil would have been good, they are going to assume that you would have a good crop. And that assumption meant that you then had to pay whatever the high taxes were. Now, it was still the case that you could be unlucky. You know, you could be in a good crop area, but you were unlucky. But that took some of the risk out of it. So that was sort of what you might think of as very ancient origins of the institutions, which we now take as kind of normal. You know, the idea of taxes, the idea of proportional taxes that we all pay on our income.
I was told once, and I'll clarify this with you, seeing as you're a man of this knowledge, that England, we have surnames based on tax originally. So, for instance, when their government or the king was trying to work out who to tax what, it was worked out, okay, you need to be, what do you do for a living? And that's why you got lots of smiths.
Okay.
Because blacksmiths was a common trade. So they knew all blacksmiths would be taxed a certain amount, all thatchers would be, and like crabbers and all these things. And that's where all the surnames derive from.
Right, I can't confirm or deny that. I'm Irish, so we still have the old traditional surnames that originally came from relationships. You know, so like son of. You know, it's true in a lot of cultures. So if you think the Icelandics still do it. Icelandic surnames vary. So if your father is called John, then you will be Johnson.
Oh, okay.
You are John's son. And then if you have a son, then, you know, whatever your name is, their surname
Samson
will be different. Samson or whatever.
That makes
so
sense.
The same is true in Irish. So if you look at Irish or Scottish Gaelic names, the Macs and the O's and Nicks are all versions. So Mac means son of. So my surname is McMahon. So at some point in history, I was from the son of Mahon, and then obviously they've stopped updating them. So my father is Frank. I'm not Mac Frank, but that's the origin of it in Ireland. So which is like I say, it appears in a lot of different languages and cultures. This idea that you're identified through your family line, through parentage, and a name that represents that.
You really know your stuff, man. So going back to the tax thing, what do you think of the tax system we have today? Do you think that's appropriate, and the fact that the government suddenly comes out with new taxes all the time?
I mean, taxes serve two main purposes. One is they raise money, right? So there's a lot of stuff that we all, what economists would call public goods, but stuff that basically only the government can provide. The most basic one you might think of is things like
roads,
safety, law and order, etc. Right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't, and you can see it in some countries where that breaks down, where individuals do have to get their own private security, but then you get great inequality in that. There is something amazing about living in most advanced countries where of course no country is perfectly safe, but you can sort of rise and sleep under a sort of a blanket of protection provided by the army, the navy, the air force, the police forces, etc. So that's a basic. But each country gets to choose whether they want different levels of public good, right? There's no reason you have to have libraries provided by the government. But again, what we don't want is we don't want to have access to books and knowledge to be restricted only to those who can afford it. So there's a strong argument, I think, for extending public goods there. And different countries make different choices, but to pay for that, they have to tax everyone. And that's why the government can do it, because they can force everyone to pay. So raising money, that's one thing. The second aspect that taxes play is they affect what we do with our choices, right? So why are the taxes, if you go back over time, almost every year in the budget, the taxes on cigarettes go up. So why do they do that? Because cigarettes are bad for your health. They're bad for other people's health if you smoke around people. So even if I don't smoke, but you were smoking in this cab, I would be affected by that. And it's actually incredibly costly to deal with tobacco-related diseases late in life for the NHS, which is of course a public resource.
So it's like you're causing a problem, you pay for the solution.
Yeah. That's so these are what economists call externalities. So if your behavior has an impact beyond you, in some cases these are positive, in which case the government should subsidize them. In some cases they're negative, like pollution, and then we should charge for it.
So give an example of positive.
Oh, a positive would be something like research and development, right? So some research and development is just good for everybody becoming smarter, all firms becoming more productive, etc. And so there's lots of research. Think about, say, cancer research, right? If a researcher discovers a new way to fight cancer, that could have positive spillovers on all of us, that we all live longer, we're less susceptible to these diseases,
less
etc.
costs on the NHS.
Think about the vaccines with COVID, right?
That's a debatable one. I understand what you're saying. I'd say about polio.
Right, polio, whichever, any of these,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
They go way beyond the private benefits, because of the fact that if you have it and you can give it to me, if you're protected from it, it makes me less likely to get it, right? So in that world, it makes sense that you want to provide subsidies or support for that, which is why the government does. It funds quite a lot of basic research in medicine, in science, in computing,
But then, I hear what you're saying. I don't dispute it, but I'm just thinking in like where you mentioned the COVID situation and the vaccinations. Those two, Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer, made 60 billion last year. Now they got subsidised, but I bet you they don't give the money back to the government that they got subsidised on.
well,
But they made 60 billion.
Well, so this is the thing, right? But if you didn't allow monopolists to take, investing in these things is really expensive and really risky, right? So if you were told that as soon as you find the cure to whatever, imagine somebody found a full-on cure for malaria. Think what that would do for say Africa, right? The cost of producing those tablets is usually pretty tiny. That's what we would call the marginal cost. But the cost of finding out how to make them, how to get something, is really big.
10 to 15 years.
So you have to allow. Well, there's a big debate on this. How do you allow those companies to recoup the investment they put in? Because if you say to them, as soon as you find it, you got to sell those tablets for whatever, 5p a tablet, whatever they cost. Nobody's going to spend the 15 years of $1 billion a year to get that. So it's a very difficult balance. So one idea that's been put forward, so this is the type of thing sort of people have, like the Gates Foundation have talked about. Once somebody finds it, let's say you've spent, you start your pharma company and you've spent 10 billion trying to find this tablet. I come along and I go, that's wonderful. There are two options. I either let you have a patent, which you can then charge what you want for 15 years, and then it becomes cheap. Or, Bill Gates comes along and he gives you 15 billion now, today, and then they give out the tablets for 5p a go. Right? But the key thing is you have to allow people to get a profit on their investment.
You lost me there. So if Bill Gates comes along, he'll give you 15 billion.
15, yeah.
So who does he give 15 billion?
To the company that spent the 10 on trying to develop the drug.
Okay. Oh, and that's his foundation thing.
I mean that's an idea. I mean, it could be a government who does this. It could be the UN, the World Health Organization. It could be anyone who does this, right?
Yeah.
The idea is somebody has to spend the 10 billion in advance, and we want people to be incentivized to, do it and do it quickly, because it makes such a big difference.
But then I know we're going off subject here, but I'm thinking that it would probably be better that the government funded that kind of thing in-house.
Well, that's...
So once you come with the pill, it's part of the NHS. Do you see what I mean? Now
Right,
you can sell it to other countries if you want to, but...
They do that too, though. Right, so some of it is funded, some of this type of research is funded, but that's the problem. Literally doing this research is like buying lottery tickets, right? You spend 5 billion, I spend 5 billion, maybe you're successful, maybe I'm successful, maybe neither of us is successful. So you kind of want lots of, in these risky things, you want lots of lottery tickets being bought. And that's why, the sort of basic scientific progress is shared, often, through journals and stuff for free or close to free, because I might make some breakthrough, but then you come and you've been working in a different area. You go, actually, I can use your breakthrough to actually solve this big problem we have. That's the old, if I have seen further, it's only by standing on the shoulders of giants line about sort of progress. But that's exactly right. But this is an active discussion, debate that countries, governments have. No,
I see what you're saying. Going back to the Bank of England.
Yeah.
Why the Bank of England? That's a very specific job. Why?
Oh, it's just the area that I'm interested in. So my main interest is in how the economy performs, and how we can control the economy. It may seem like it's one-sided. We just don't want the economy doing badly, but actually you don't want the economy running too hot either.
Or like a Japan situation.
No, Japan has been running cold for too long, right? But that's really bad. But equally, you don't want it overheating, because then you get inflation, right? We're seeing inflation now.
But surely, this is what I don't understand about inflation. When I was in uni, I had this debate with the lecturer. I was saying, why do you need inflation? And the reason why I asked that question is because I understand the government or the Bank of England regulates the inflation, but then I would have thought a market finds its own equilibrium, and things go up depending on demand, they go down depending on demand. Obviously with innovation, things could just stop on certain areas and increase on other areas. So why does the government need to get involved?
Right, so the government doesn't regulate inflation. what you described as the market is the way inflation is determined. What the government, and in particular the Bank of England, does is it tries to regulate the demand in order to limit the amount of inflation that we have. So, a little bit of inflation is really neither here nor there. And actually, the last 20 years plus years in the UK, we really haven't had to deal with inflation in any really major or significant way. This is the first time. In fact, I asked my first year students in January about whether they get asked, and they usually do, to list the three things they think are economists and macroeconomists should think about. And this year I got two of the standard ones, which are climate and inequality.
Okay,
this is the first
generation.
This is the first year ever that this generation has said inflation. They've never seen inflation really before in their lives. Like, even I would say in my life, I haven't seen really marked inflation. It was sort of high when I was very young, but I wasn't aware of it.
That was it was the 80s? In the
80s, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember, yeah. Yeah, okay.
So inflation is costly, right? And it lowers people's ability to buy stuff. But just going back to what the bank does is it tries to assess whether demand is too far above. You're right. Some goods are going to fall out. Some, innovation. The bank reacts to innovation. It doesn't try to control it or even stimulate it.
I still don't see why we need someone to get involved in a natural order of people demanding things. Because, for instance, if you've got a farmer and he's producing potatoes, and the demand of potatoes goes really high because of the population, or I don't know, let's say we've got a load of immigrants who come over, and now, like Poland, where they've got 1.2 or 5 million people walked into their country, the potato demand's going to go through the roof.
Yep.
Yeah. Now that's an unforeseen act, but then you could always buy from your neighbours or import.
Well, yeah, and in that case, the price has to go up, and the bank would not try to stop that price going up. So, because that's a relative price shift, right?
Oh.
They're not concerned about the price of one good or the other. They're not going to say, oh, the Apple iPhone is very expensive and the Samsung is cheap. That's the market, right? If that's the case, then people should stop buying the expensive iPhone and start buying the cheaper Samsung. But maybe people just like the iPhone, right? We all just have fallen in love with it, and then we buy it, and that's fine. What they're trying to stop is, let's say just overall demand is just going, really through the roof, and there's not enough supply. If you think about what happened and is happening now, there's not enough supply of goods in the economy. A lot of it being driven by post-COVID recovery. China is still in lockdown. If you look at there are ships, thousands of ships waiting to get into and out of the port in Shanghai, but they can't be unloaded because workers have been told to all stay at home. So all those goods that we buy that are usually coming from China, they're not coming in anymore. Now, if we all keep demanding cars, iPhones, etc., their price is going to have to go up. So what? But
why does it have to go up? Can't it just be that? Oh, guys, they're sold out. That's it.
Oh, okay. But then how do we choose who gets them?
Well, it's first come, first serve.
Oh, fine, but the market has a way, right? If you're the guy selling it, you say, I'll
up the price.
I'll up the price because there's 100 people demanding this, and I can only give them 10.
Oh, well,
so I want to figure out which of these 10 is going to get it. And so if you think about
the government could step in and regulate and say, all right, all potatoes now can't be sold more than 50 pence.
So that's a system called price controls.
Yeah.
They've been used. They in fact they get used very well in times of war, but outside of war times, that type of policy generally goes very badly wrong, because you regulate them for a while and then people just stop producing potatoes, right? If it costs you, imagine the government came along and said to you, you can't charge more than £20 for a trip from Heathrow to centre of London, and you're like, it costs like £16 to pay for the petrol. You're just going to not go. And so then everybody who arrives at Heathrow is going to be like, where's the taxi?
Yeah.
So you have to This is why I think what you first said is completely right. You have to allow the market to determine the right price. So what the bank can do is just try and influence the market. That's what they do. And it's not a battle they always get right. It's very hard. It's very hard to even know. Like if you just think about right now, how much of what we're seeing now is too much demand, and how much is just there's not enough supply, but we're going to be stuck with that for a long time, for a short time, who knows?
As an economist, do you reckon we'll be in this predicament for a while now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it depends what you mean by a while. I don't think it's going to be like decades, but I do think that the next year, 2 years, it's going to take a while for all this to wash out. And a big thing that's going to determine it, like I say, is when are we going to get supply back online? When are these cheap goods?
We should look to other economies, other countries. Like Africa's got a massive massive amount of people.
Yeah. No, that's right. But I don't think people are a problem now. The big problem is we're getting none of the stuff from China that we used to get before. But you're absolutely right. I mean, what's interesting is in Africa, China has been much faster to start investing in Africa than most of the West.
So you need the natural resources.
Yeah, that's right, and it wants the soft power as well. So it's being very smart in that respect.
Well, we've come to the end of this journey. It's really fascinating and informative. I feel like I should be one of your students and stuff. But thanks a lot. What uni do you go to if anybody wants to find you?
The University of Oxford.
The University. Oh, you're an Oxford man.
I'm an Oxford man. Just anywhere here.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for that, and we wish you well.
Thanks very much.
We hope that episode enhanced your life. We post an interview every day, as well as vlogging on our social media channel. Don't forget to subscribe to get our latest episode.